Hello, everyone. This is Kotaku SplitScreen, episode 4. My name is Jason Schreier.
And my name is Kirk Hamilton.
And Kirk and I are here bringing you the hottest video game news and commentary on any podcast out there. This is clearly the best podcast out there. I've always wanted to get on a podcast and say that. So this is my declaration. This is the best gaming podcast. Well, forget Giant Bomb, IGN, whatever. And just to prove that, today we have brought as a special guest the best Mario Maker player in the world, the one and only Patrick Klepek. Patrick, how are you today?
Take it. I'm not going to... Well, how I am today is different than being the best Mario Maker player in the world. I feel damaged. I feel broken. I feel as though I lost a piece of my soul that can't be brought back. I may have beaten a stage last night at 2 a.m, but I think as a person, I may have also been beaten.
Well, okay, let's walk it back a little bit. Tell us about the adventures that you've been going on over the past few weeks.
So, I stream some stuff before I start sort of my shift at work, and I've been kind of like playing around with like different games, and I was trying to find like something that kind of connected with the audience, and I always like to play games that the audience can be participatory in some way. I feel like that's what best services Twitch and YouTube, and just kind of the way that players tend to interact with communities these days. And so I don't really like making things. I'm not like, anytime a user-generated game comes along, I'm definitely in that 99% of like, I just want to play with people's creations. And so I started playing Mario Maker, and I came up with this concept of something called Mario Maker Mornings, in which people in the comments would suggest levels for me to play. And probably the biggest feature, feature I was most known for at Giant Bomb when I worked there, was playing through Spelunky, a game that I had no experience with. It was extremely difficult. I had written it off as something that I was never going to be able to understand or be competent at. But I started doing these daily streams where I talked through my process, like I worked through failure, and over time eventually made it through and beat the quote-unquote final boss in that game when you run through hell, which is a fairly difficult task to make it all the way there. And so I started doing that with Mario Maker stages. I started finding difficult, obtuse, strange Mario Maker stages and playing them on a daily basis. And it was going really well. And then over at Giant Bomb, they decided to do a feature in which their community participated in the creation process, in which Dan Reichert, an editor over there, who's also a big Mario fan, he would build the level, and then the other editors sitting on the couch during the video stream would pick out the elements to be dumped in there. And so that level came out, and I said, well, that would be fun. I worked with those guys. They're good friends of mine. Like, why didn't I play that stage? What I didn't realize was that stage was like specifically meant to be like, a total nightmare, and the levels is not made in a way that is supposed to be player friendly, and so it was really difficult. And so that was a lot of fun. They did another stage like that, and Dan Reichert made another stage specifically.
So what, when you say really difficult, like what kind of difficulty are we talking about? Like super tough platforming?
Yeah, it's basically, it's super tough platforming. It's obscure mechanics. Like, for example, in the second stage, specifically, there is a door that you clearly have to get into, and it's along a set of tracks that are constantly moving. And so when you're on there, you're jumping as Mario, and it's like, how the heck do you get in this door? Because in some video games, if you're playing a platformer and there's a door, you can kind of just jump up and get into the door. But this is not the case in the Mario franchise. In the Mario franchise, you need to be situated in front of that door. And what I realized was that there was actually a POW block in that little section, but you only have about a second or two before it falls off and just dumps into the lava. And so you have to grab the block, start moving your way over to the door, put it at the edge of where it's going to start getting dumped off, jump on the block, ride the block, get in the door, and then move on to the rest of the stage. But of course, once you go in the door, immediately it drops you onto a bed of spikes and kills you, unless you are holding left and then navigate off to the side and work your way through the stage. So it's things like this that are meant to kind of purposely frustrate you and infuriate you, and they're not meant to be fun, but they are fun to watch someone suffer through.
It's funny. Like I feel like I've been watching some of your playthroughs, and the thing that struck me about these kinds, I feel like this is a certain genre of Mario Maker level, this like the ridiculous, purposefully obtuse level, and it feels to me like watching it is watching a shared language be perverted just enough that it doesn't make sense anymore. Like, you'll see something that we all kind of understand, like you're talking about the door or a power block and these things that in a regular Mario game would be done in a certain way, and in the levels that you're playing, they're purposefully done in a way that fucks with you. Like, I was watching you play, and there was this huge Bowser, like, at the very beginning of the level, and you run under him, and you're kind of expecting that you've gotten past him, and then he turns around and starts chasing you, and he's, like, jumping and doing, like, and he kills you immediately because nobody would have expected Bowser to do that. I feel like it's, like, constantly watching these just tricks, like the
subversions.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
when you jumped, you, like, hit that power-up block, the question mark block, and it was, like, just big ghosts that circled around you.
And that's what's really curious about Mario Maker, and what I've enjoyed about it so much is that other than it being incredibly well made, other than the tool set just being like light years beyond Little Big Planet or any other game that has tried to do something like this, is that what makes Mario unique and is going to be different than any other franchise that ever tries to do something like this, whether it's new or built on something existing, is exactly what you said, Kirk, is the shared vocabulary in which we have, for a lot of the fans, the people playing this, 20 plus years of a shared understanding of mechanics and items and enemies and physics that just there's no way to replicate that. That is distinct to Nintendo, and that's what allows the perversions and the subversions to be really entertaining and fun, because the audience knows exactly what they think to expect. And then when it doesn't go that way, or you have to do it in ways that Nintendo never would ever ask you to do for the kind of levels they design, it's actually a lot of fun, because the perversion is actually what I'm there for. Like, I don't want to play a bunch of stages that would have come out of the Miyamoto factory, because I want to play those. I want Nintendo to make those. And so I want players to use the shared vocabulary to do different things that Nintendo would never attempt. And that doesn't mean you need to play the ultra hard stages that I'm participating in, but there is a spectrum there that I find far more interesting than this narrative that's being built about Mario Maker that, well, just people will get these bad levels out of their system and then they'll start making good ones. I think that's just fundamentally different than what's actually interesting about Mario Maker.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it's like the frame. I feel like it's like the basic framework for a joke, really, which is that you take something and you take an expectation and then you flip it on its head. And it's very hard to tell video game jokes in general because the player is so often the butt of the joke. And I feel like watching you play these games has kind of been like watching you voluntarily be the butt of the joke. Like, that's part of the appeal of it, is that you're like suffering through these hard levels.
It's a twisted science experiment.
But it is funny. Like, it is fun to watch, right? I think it's really enjoyable. I mean, partly because you're very affable about it and you don't get too frustrated even when it's really hard.
So we have to get to the Reckoning.
Yes.
Reckoning.
Yes.
So what happened was, so then at the end of when I finished the last video and the last stage that Giant Bomb made, at the end I decided to apparently cut a wrestling promo. I'm not sure exactly how I decided to transition to that.
This was last week, right?
Yeah, this is a week ago.
Okay.
Last Friday, and then last Thursday or Friday. And basically I said, Dan, I finished all your stages. You can't beat me. There's nothing you can do. And I was like, you need to step it up. And so he took that extremely personally, and then went on to spend 20 plus hours mapping out a stage, testing a stage, getting out graph paper to create a stage, to make sure that what he was setting up was going to be accurate to the tile set that would happen in the Mario stages. Released that stage, crowdfunded the exploits so that I would have to go through an intended path as opposed to something different, and then said, if I could beat it in 72 hours, he'd submit $100 to a charity of my choice. I responded in kind, and then we set up a charity page for other people to get in on the action, which at this point is like well over $10,000, which is utterly ridiculous.
Man.
That's awesome. That's great.
So yeah, I've been doing that for the last 72 hours, and then last night is where... So the first couple of videos, I mean, I didn't know... I spent roughly 3 or 4 hours not going anywhere, having literally no idea what to do, because this stage, and here's what's so unique about it, and what I've, this is probably gonna end up making like Mario Maker like my favorite game of the year, is it's a very unique experience that I had, in which a stage has been built that was specifically created to exploit my own weaknesses as a player. So when games are usually made, they're made in a way to appeal to a wide audience, and then maybe the player can add some variance on there on a difficulty level or other variables that the player can control. But otherwise, games are generally made for a lot of people. And in this instance, it's using this shared vocabulary, but the vocabulary is being applied in a way to purposely exploit the things I'm bad at. I'm bad at music notes. I can't jump on music notes. I've died hundreds and hundreds of times on music notes playing this level. And the reason it's full of music notes is because Dan observed my previous stages and said, this would be the way to break him. This would be the way to frustrate him. It's tons of music notes. And he's totally right. It was so infuriating. I've gotten much better at jumping on them, I will say. So I did learn something. But to have an experience in which something was created specifically to unnerve you based on what you are good and bad at was a wholly unique experience that I have never had with a video game before.
So the interesting thing about Dan's level, the Reckoning, and Dan is a twisted dude. We all know Dan.
Generally speaking.
He's an evil person. The interesting thing about his level is that it's not just platforming and jumping on music notes. There's also like that puzzle element that seems unique to Mario Maker. Like you have to, from what I remember, you have to get a P-switch, you have to get a Goomba and move it somewhere to get a P-switch, and then you have to backtrack. Tell us a little bit about that.
So there are huge chunks of the level that are misdirection. And that's one of the characteristics that had defined Dan's stages before, even the ones he made in collaboration with the community at Giant Bomb, was often creating huge swaths of the stage that were merely there to waste your time, to frustrate you, to have you spend hours going in one direction only to realize that there's nothing there. So, for example,
great video game design.
Yeah, it's very player-friendly. So in the Reckoning, there's a pipe you can go in which the section you navigate through is a bunch of really infuriating music notes and dry bones that are spitting out bones, and there are piranha plants spitting out fireballs. And if you navigate your way all the way through that, then if you kind of flutter your way down with the cape, all you get to is a giant stone statue with a grin laughing at you because you made your way all the way there. And if you try and jump beyond it, it's just endless lava that ends up hitting against a wall. Or if you go to the left of it, there's a pipe that you can't leap from it to go anywhere. You're stuck down there, and the pipe doesn't go anywhere. It's just a goddamn pipe. And so it's stuff like that where, I spent 2 hours exploring that before I go, okay, well, that part of the level is off limits, or isn't it? Maybe I just haven't figured out that part of the puzzle. But, for example, there's a part early in the stage where the coins in Mario Maker are interesting because they're being used by the players instructionally to try and provide directions to the player, often because they're not clever enough to do that through the level design. And the coins in Mario Maker really don't mean anything except if you want to use it as a high score sort of tablature. But other than that, they're there just because aesthetically Mario games have included coins. So the beginning of the stage, there are a layer of coins above the music notes you're jumping on. And for hours, I just collected that stuff going, because I don't know, because they're the coins. I'm going to grab these coins. That's what I do in a Mario game. And it wasn't until hours later when I encountered a P-block, and the P-block in Mario games flip coins into solid blocks, was that actually all those coins were bridges. And so when you make your way across the first part of the stage, when you go from left to right because the game, you can kind of see the exit at the end but not know how to get there, you go all the way from left to right to grab this P-block, which then you have to bring all the way from right to left, drop the P-block down, grab a star, walk over these coins turn into bridges, go through a gauntlet of fire, grab a POW block that then you then take from the left all the way to the right. It's infuriating. And
it's funny. It's cool that this game, I feel like a lot of times when we talk about games these days, we wrestle with authorial intent and like the voice of the creator a lot. Like there's this whole auteur theory thing where like, oh yeah, like this guy made this game, this woman made this game. And yet that's always doing a disservice to all the people who worked on it. But this level is like very clearly I mean, you said he kind of that Dan crowdsourced parts of it, but it feels like a conversation between you and him, which is really very cool. I think that dynamic you're talking about is cool. It's almost like a dungeon master, like D&D player kind of a thing.
Yes.
Like it's closer to tabletop
Totally.
gaming than anything else. And it is really uncommon in video games. And it's neat to see that, like that. I think when sometimes people talk about purposefully cruel games and how, like I was saying before, like you're the butt of the joke. Like getting to the end of this really hard to get to area and then realizing there's just a like statue there laughing at you and there's nothing you can do. Like that shitty emptiness is the point, right? Like you get there and that was the whole point. And then, the creator made a statement to you and he said, haha, like I fooled you. And that was the whole point of the thing. I think that's really, really cool. Like that.
But even as the player, if for me, that eliminates a route, right? So yes, it's like, it's cruel and it's mean and it's horrible. And why would a human do that? Like what would motivate them to want to create a stage like that? But for me as the player trying to solve it, I have to go up against those gates and I have to push them as far as I can because I have to push Dan's joke to its limit so I can safely say, okay, this is not part of the stage. In my mind, I can mentally cross that out and start working through these other paths. And so that's what was interesting about playing the game and the reaction from people where they would go, you're spending a lot of time on stuff that doesn't seem meaningful. And it's like, well, for me, I have to start determining what is meaningful and what isn't so that I don't have this nagging feeling in the back of my head that, well, maybe I should explore this. And so that's what took the vast majority of the time was just kind of Xing that stuff out.
Do you think, it's funny because, I feel like that plays into an energy that I'm seeing a lot more in video games lately across the board. It was, popularized maybe in Souls games, and then I feel like Spelunky is loaded with that kind of stuff. We've seen it in Destiny, where, it seems like people or GTA Online has all this, the secret stuff where there's, a weird area and a weird thing, and people start to get into their heads that maybe there's something there, and you become obsessed with checking every possibility, to the point where you're you're tilting at windmills, but it's so exciting. Anyways, you never know. Maybe Dan hid the thing and the actual secret to the level is some stupid, impossible, hidden thing over here.
It's a conversation between players, or it's a conversation between a creator who isn't trying to give you a fun little game to play. He's trying to fuck with your head and just drive you insane slowly over the course of this entire level. And by the way, Kirk, I think any listeners who had who bet that Kirk could not go this entire podcast without mentioning Destiny, you guys are the winners.
I think we all knew that was going to happen, so I had to get it in there somehow.
Yeah, but there is that these games like Dark Souls and Spelunky, there is an appeal that doesn't work for everyone, but is certainly something I am attracted to and is only a relatively recent phenomenon in the games that I play of enjoying the seemingly impossible challenge, right? And those games work when they're constructed in which a vocabulary that's fair, right? That's often, Dark Souls is a hard game. I'm never going to be one of those people that says, it's really not that hard. It's a hard game. It is.
Once you learn to parry, though, it's not that bad.
Yeah. But it is somewhat overrated in terms of, because it is a fair game, right? But it is a hard game. Those are not mutually exclusive terms. And Spelunky is the same way. And so I think the crucial thing about Mario Maker and what makes, me going up against Dan's level feel fair, even though so much of it feels unfair, is there's a world where you imagine Nintendo didn't require you to finish the stage, right? Or they missed a crucial step like that. And the fact that I knew Dan had to finish that stage, it meant there's a route through.
Yeah.
And so it's that, knowing that exists, making that a requirement for the level to be published, means that ultimately I still always had hope because it is finishable. There is a solution here. So as much as I'm banging my head against it, he had to finish it himself. And so then that's when it becomes the reverse of him getting at me is me trying to get at him. But the way I get at him is by exploiting and working through his stage in a way where we meet on this battleground, but the battleground is different than anything else I've sort of had to deal with.
It's so dramatic. It really is so dramatic. It's a type of multiplayer gaming that I've never really seen before. It's really cool.
It's unique to the internet. So, Patrick, I was watching you for a while yesterday.
That's not creepy or anything. Nothing creepy.
I was watching.
No, there were too many people watching me last night. It got up to
people.
7,500 people. That was it was unnerving.
That's a lot of pressure. That is a lot of pressure.
I eventually just stopped looking at the number because it was clearly just sort of catching fire in a way that it was causing my palms to sweat.
Right.
So I saw people in the chat accusing you of cheating and like saying it was collusion, that you're going to solve it at the last possible minute, and that like, oh, how did Patrick know to fly up there? How did he know that the P-switch was there? So I started getting in the chat and like trolling people and being like, oh, how did Patrick know that if you run with the cape you could fly? But I thought it'd be interesting. Well, so I'm interested in picking your brain a little bit about how you kind of piece together each part. Was it like a trial and error thing?
Yeah, so the structure I tried to make for the streams was the streams were meant to play with theories that I had already kind of started deducing or going down a certain track offline, because I have a full-time job. I work with you guys. Even though I had 72 hours to finish it, I was not going to be able to stream for 72 hours. And also, the process of streaming
You probably
is different.
could have. You work for Kotaku. You probably could have.
I could have made a pitch for it. But playing a game on a stream is different than playing a game on your own. There is a heightened tension. There is the obligation to talk. You just end up playing in a different way. I'm often articulating my process, and then I end up feeling bad if I'm going to, like, if I want to try a very specific thing, like I'm going to explore this little area that I don't think has anything to do with anything, but I want to do that for 45 minutes. Like, that just doesn't seem very fun for a stream. So I would do that stuff offline. But granted, there was also, there were people trying to troll me, and also people who I presume felt bad because I had people early on that said, I believe in Patrick Klepek, I believe he's going to beat this stage. Then they watched the solution to the stage and were like, sorry dude, like I'm out, like you have zero chance to do this. And I didn't blame them now looking back at the way the stage is solved, but like I would like finding the spot that was up above, right? Like nowhere in the level is it communicated that you should fly up and there's a section with a Goomba that you drop a bomb on in order to grab the Goomba, and then you take the Goomba all the way to the end of the stage, the whole time kicking him every 3 seconds because he wiggles and can hurt you and get out of your grasp. I figured that stuff offline, and what I actually ended up discovering was that there were probably 2 different instances in which and there's 2 instances I remember in particular where I glanced at the chat mostly to see if my moderators were doing okay with the influx. Like normally they're dealing with like 300 people on a stream, not like 3,000, 5,000, 7,000. So I wanted to make sure everything was okay there, and also make sure the stream was up and blah, 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 blah. And then Twitter is part of my job. So I had to use Twitter during the day, and I had one person say something very specific about the stage. So I told Dan, I disclosed it to Dan, like, hey, I've discovered this thing. I already had a theory about it. I don't know what it means. I'll let you know if this kind of breaks the whole process. As it turned out, that guy was trolling me. He was telling me to do something completely different with the stage. So in trying to tell me a spoiler, he was actually screwing with me for what I didn't have to do. He ultimately told me to take this Goomba the other direction, the wrong way of the stage. So, I actually didn't end up getting spoiled in any sort of meaningful way.
That smells like Reichert's doing, like that whole...
it might have been him with like a false Twitter account. And ultimately, even once you know what to do in that stage, the execution is so brutal that I think even given the tools of what to do, it would be extremely difficult for a lot of people to even pull that off. So... I'm tipping my hat to myself right now, I guess is what I'm saying.
So last night when I tuned out, you had kind of found the correct way and then given up on that correct way, and then you were trying to do something else. Like I remember you had found that you had to go back to get the POW lock back at the beginning. But for some reason, you stopped doing that because you thought it was misdirection, and then you started trying to figure out how to like jump on the P switch to get into the door.
Yep.
Right. So when did you realize that it wasn't actually misdirection and you had to go back?
I didn't. I just had to. Eventually, it's the same way that I went all the way through that like kind of sub level, which was an hour and a half of misdirection to get a structure that laughed at me at the end. Was you just eventually have to like focus on certain ways to do the level, because if I was playing this stage on my own, not for a charity, and I hadn't agreed to these rules, I would have just looked it up, right? Like I would have discovered, okay, the execution is still really difficult. Maybe this stage is still going to be satisfying to do on its own. But I didn't have that option. I couldn't text someone like, "What do you think of this theory?" Like I couldn't look on Twitter for like, "Hey, could someone give me a vague hint?" Like that just wasn't something I could do. So you had to just start mentally committing to certain paths, because if you got overwhelmed by the plethora of options, you were never going to finish the stage, or you're never going to cross off one that you could do. And so I eventually just sort of thought that my belief was one of the main tricks to the previous stage was getting on top of a POW block and using that to get in a door. Right. And it was my belief that he was using that trick again, but just making it much more difficult to get there. So I just committed to that, and then eventually got lucky enough where, I'm sure we've all had this feeling when you play a game that has a puzzle, is that you stare at something long enough and just something comes to you. Like, there weren't moments where I was extremely clever. It was more just you stare at, like, it's what are those paintings that you stare at and then like the image comes
magic
to you?
Eye.
Yeah, it was like a magic eye painting. Like, there was nothing special about it. It was just like, oh right, there's a star, and if I grab the star, like, I mean, it was just kind of sometimes things kind of come to you.
Yeah, I like that you're using, that you used the same thing I think that we use for every game like this when we get stuck. Like, if, to go back to Souls games, like if you've played a lot of Souls games, you're more prepared for the next way that the Souls game is going to mess with you, because you kind of just know what to expect. You're like, oh, okay, so this door is locked, so I'm not going to be able to open it yet. Like, okay, so this guy is moving this certain way. Like, you kind of learn the language, and you have kind of learned, you're like, okay, Dan likes to do this thing, and so it'll probably be some kind of thing like that. Or you can think he knows that I know that he likes to do this, so maybe he's going to flip the whole thing around just to mess with me. And it's that
so
same
many layers.
thing of
so many
understanding
layers.
the creator. Right, there's so many layers, but because you kind of have that understanding of him the same way that we understand, any kind of well-designed game, you can kind of approach it the same way, which is cool.
So are you going to do another one?
So the next step, so I finished it last night around 2 a.m., and I wanted to go to bed at around 11, but then once the viewers started spiking and the charity was getting a lot of money, I was like, okay, I gotta ride this out.
You gotta do it for charity,
thing,
man. You gotta do what you gotta do.
Gotta fight Dan Reichert.
Even though there was a probably hour-long stretch where, I got all the way to the goal, and then you can still die at the goal because there's fire barriers that you have to watch one last pattern in order to get through. I screwed that up, and then spent an hour just completely broken. I wasn't able to hit the platforms right. I wasn't able to. It was bad. It was
at 1 a.m.
I feel like we need to get you does Gawker Media Health Insurance cover therapy for Mario Maker?
I was talking. I was cursing Koji Kondo and the music he made for this level because I hated it. I didn't want to hear his goddamn
the music
drums in the background.
The music was terrible too. Or it was a particularly kind of awful sounding.
Not great. Not great. So yeah, there's a long stretch, and then I did end up finishing it around 2 a.m. We ended up, because we raised so much money, we ended up splitting the pot. So $5,000 to go to his charity, $5,000 to go to my charity.
I thought you were going to be like, $5,000 to go to my weed fund.
Yeah. We took it home. We said, we'll skip. We only said we were giving $100 to charity. We'll take that $5,000 from everyone. And then the next step is, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be in San Francisco for a wedding, and I'm going out a couple of days early because my wife is helping put the wedding together. So we have to sort of figure out if this will all work, but the tentative plan is that Jeff Gersman will act as a moderator, and he will create his own stage that Dan and I will both go up against. We haven't decided the parameters of it, whether it will be Nintendo World Championship style, in which one person plays while the other person is blindfolded with headphones on so that they can't know what's going on, and then we swap.
I like that.
Or if we both play simultaneously and just try and work through it at the same time. But the idea is to get a neutral party to make a stage to torture both of us and to escalate this in person in San Francisco.
But Jeff is Dan's boss, so he's not a neutral party. And really, you betrayed him by coming to us. So.
Yeah, but he might want to crush Dan more than he's upset about that. So I feel like I might have that on my side.
That is fair. So I was talking to Dan yesterday and complimenting him on how devious his level is.
It's a well-designed stage. It's ridiculous, but it is absolutely a well-designed stage.
It is, if you consider good design, or well, so if you have a goal, right? The goal is to evoke a certain type of emotion, and usually it's we want to evoke fun. But if your goal is to evoke sadness and like soul crushing,
Yes.
then this is well designed. But anyway, I was showing him this level that Patricia discovered, and it's like a boss gauntlet, and it's really interesting because the way it works is you go into each boss room and you beat the boss, and when you beat the boss, you get to unlock a certain part of this long hallway. So like, all right, there's this long hallway full of cannons, right? And it's blocking the way to the goal. And the way to get past each cannon is you beat the boss, you show up in a doorway right under the cannon, and you can break a brick under it and remove it from the hallway. So you have to do this for each boss level. And he was
That's
like,
really
wow,
cool.
I never thought of that. I was like, now you need to make a new Reckoning with that concept just to totally fuck Patrick up.
Stop it.
That's,
I need a break.
That's the goal. It's a good thing that Mario Maker actually lets you stream video games, because if Mario Maker was made by like Square Enix, you would not be able to stream it.
So one last point I'll say about Mario Maker before as I ruin your great transition is one of the great things about this whole event has been the conspiracy theories that have come out of it. One of which being like,
you did not
man, Patrick's just really milking this out because, he's just trying to monetize this and just, like, get all that sweet internet money. Like, one, you can't monetize Mario Maker videos. So, despite the fact that that is the most popular thing by far I have ever done on my YouTube channel in the last year, can't make a dime on it. And then also, I'm not a Twitch partner, so 7,500 people were watching my stream. Can't get a dime off of those people. Can't get that sweet $5 subscription. So the idea that I made any money off of that proposes that I'm going to run off with $10,000 for charity, which hopefully I have earned enough goodwill to not be suspected of doing that. So
I feel like, I saw people saying that that fire flowers can't melt steel beams, and
that's also probably true. That's true.
Patrick did 9/11. Anyway, Square Enix, man, what is the deal with these companies just like not getting it?
Well, do you want to kind of set up what the?
Yeah, maybe
I wrote about it, but I've been talking a lot for the last. Maybe someone else should set it up.
No, man. You wrote the story. You're a special guest.
Yeah, you wrote the story.
All right.
Tell us about Square Enix and Dragon Quest Heroes.
So in the last 24 hours, it's been kind of a up and down with Square Enix. On one hand, you had them embracing a ambitious fan-made update mod for Deus Ex, and then on the other hand, they were getting roundly mocked on Twitter and other places because the launch of Dragon Quest Heroes on PS4 came with a bunch of audacious streaming requirements that were just kind of like hidden at the bottom of the webpage for the game, in which there's a couple of things. One, they have only cleared the music rights for YouTube. So if you stream the game on Twitch with the in-game music turned on, they cannot guarantee that anyone will come after you for copyright, which I think is related to Jazz Rack, which is an organization in Japan that represents a lot of music labels and a lot of independent artists. They famously had YouTube bring down tens of thousands of videos back in 2006 when YouTube was kind of getting its footing with copyright issues. And so they can't guarantee that those videos can stay up. They won't get hit by a content blocker that both Twitch and YouTube employ. In addition to that, there's you have to make sure you put a certain set of copyright in your YouTube description if you put the video up on YouTube, and in a future game update they're going to patch that in so it happens automatically, but right now they don't have that, so make sure you put it in manually or else they will hit you with a copyright strike. And they have done copyright strikes for people that don't put in that copyright in the descriptions in the videos.
You just have to say copyright Square Enix?
There's a very specific copyright you have to put in.
My God.
They have a very specific language that has to be displayed. If you look up
stupid.
If you look up Square Enix screenshots, it's not for every game. It's not for the new Final Fantasy, weirdly enough, which I don't know if it's a progressive attitude or it's just like an oversight. But if you look up the last MMO, which was that 15? Is that what
14.
What that one is?
14.
14? If you look up screenshots for that are official, you will see an obnoxious line of copyright text on every single one of those that reflects how they ask people to do this for Dragon Quest Heroes and some other games. So it's utterly bizarre and wild, and it reflects, I think, a dichotomy in Square Enix and their Eidos side in terms of how they're handling sort of like fans and fan communities and fan contributions. And also it's just really frustrating because, I think it's one thing to have a conversation about how people should monetize your stuff, but it's quite another to have these vague, weird guidelines that not even Square seems super sure about. There's a line at the bottom of their guidelines that says, even if you follow this, we can't guarantee you won't get hit with a copyright strike.
I feel like that line,
what?
don't you think? I feel like that line is the line that kind of like sums the entire thing up, right? Like these guys have no idea. I think a lot of these big companies just have no idea what is going to happen in a year on any of these services. And so I think a lot of the stuff, it strikes me as preemptive ass covering. We want to control our thing and make as much money off of our thing as possible, so we're going to just make you do all this stuff, and even then we're not actually sure what's going to happen. And that's kind of how it feels to me anyways, which sums up how I feel about streaming a lot in general, like, you know, as an endeavor or a money-making, you know, endeavor.
Well, with the Mario Maker stuff, right? Like, I'm lucky enough to have a full-time job, you know, working at Kotaku and at places in the past where the streaming stuff I'm doing on the side is just for fun, you know, like, you know, whatever, maybe that becomes something different in the future. Like, our jobs are weird and change all the time. Not sure what this looks like in 5 years. But let's say let's say suddenly I didn't have that. Let's say I was suddenly out of a job and like, well, okay, the thing you would want to do, it makes sense. Double down on what's popular. What do people like that you do? Okay, well, I'm doing more Mario Maker. I can't make a dime doing that
right.
unless I decide to participate in Nintendo's completely completely ridiculous partner program, in which I don't know the details, but what I remember from it is that they take a lot of money, and you're only whitelisted to do certain types of games. And so you're ceding this huge amount of control to a corporation. And, you know, I think they're right if they want to go down that path. I disagree with it. I think that misses the forest through the trees about why people are doing this stuff. But, you know, like I looked at Square's site for how they handle Final Fantasy 14, and for the MMO, they say, hey, if you want to make money on this, like, you should contact us, but also we get a lot of requests, so we might not get back to you. It's like, well, what?
A lot of these companies, especially the Japanese companies like Square Enix, they're very much about the short-term profits, and they never really look at, like, how will this affect our brand long-term, and won't this, like, what will this goodwill, this fan goodwill do for us if we allow these people to do this? And that's one of the reasons that, like, all these companies are so bad at digital game preservation and, like selling their old games and restoring them and keeping them up to date on modern consoles. It's really sad. It's such a, like, this industry is so much about, like, what are you doing for me now? And it's so much, like, people just aren't looking at the long term at all.
I feel like a lot of this streaming policy is based around companies looking at streamers and the relationship between companies and streamers, and not about the companies looking at the streamers as a conduit to their fans. Like, there are three parts to the equation, right? There's the fans who watch the streamers who play the games, and the companies that make the games, and then the fans play the games. So it kind of goes in a, like, triangle. And the streamers are, like, watching streams is such a cool way to experience video games, and that's, I think, the future looking thing that I feel like is being missed here a lot of the time, because the whole thing is concerned with, okay, well, you're making money off of our games, so we need to work out what that means, without thinking about that third part. Like, you're providing this really cool thing for a lot of people who like our
On the
games.
flip side, some companies are, like, straight up paying YouTubers to play their games.
Well, right.
Like, I mean, PewDiePie's had some deals where, like, companies like Ubisoft would pay him to play games, and that's a whole nother issue entirely.
I mean, I outright know I have made Nintendo thousands in the last week with this video series, because I've heard from, at this point, probably a dozen people who said, I had no interest in getting Mario Maker. I went out and bought a Wii U, and I've got pictures of people, like, holding up their Wii U and their copies of Mario Maker, and, like, this inspired them to go and check that out. And, like, you know,
you saved the Wii U. You saved the Wii U.
Exactly, single-handedly.
It is kind of crazy that this game sort of did. I mean, that of all the, like, I would not have predicted that a year ago, that Mario Maker would be the game that actually would, like, it really does feel like it's made the Wii U more relevant than any other Wii U
If only
game.
it had come out 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I'm not sure that would have made that much of a difference. I think it might have made people understand the gamepad a little bit more and their theory there, but it also, like, scares the crap out of me, because it's hard for me to imagine a gamepad being part of the NX, and, like, the idea you can't do Mario Maker with a traditional gamepad. Well, like, it wouldn't be nearly, you could, but it wouldn't be nearly as compelling.
You could do it with a 3DS.
Yeah, or I mean,
You could.
I could imagine. I mean, just like, I could imagine that gamepad, like Wii U gamepad, working with a new console, even if it's not the like
Right, just
required.
transitioning
You know.
over. Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the general rumors or speculation or whatever is that the NX will be a cross between handheld and console somehow. So who knows? Who knows what they'll wind up doing and how? But if they could implement that in some way. But yes, I feel like Nintendo at least recognizes that Mario Maker is very much like that sort of thing is very much the future of games, and that whole Minecraft-y idea of like letting the players create things and just giving people total autonomy to do stuff is very 2015. So credit to them for coming up with this idea. Even though it took 30 years.
Yeah. Well, they take their time, but you're right. You know, like anyone else could have done this, but they take their time. They do it right. And of course, there are plenty of things about Mario Maker. Well, yeah. Okay. The things they get right are things other companies would never get right. The things they get wrong are fixable, right? Like those are the big differences, right? Like, so I don't imagine any other company having been able to pull off the tool set, the intuitiveness of Mario Maker, other than Nintendo, right? But the things they do wrong, like not allowing you to make playlists, like not allowing you to do these like really obvious things that hopefully they will incorporate, but maybe they won't, and maybe they probably won't. Those are those are upsetting, and they hold back the game and the community. But I get less upset about them because I'm just glad that Mario Maker exists as a template for others to work off of, because Nintendo's the only company that could have pulled that off.
Yeah, I'm just glad Mario Maker exists to crush Patrick Klepek.
Just for the emotional payoff. I feel like I really like that Mario Maker is a redux of the most played out Nintendo idea, because people always say, oh, like Nintendo has no new ideas. All they make are 2D Mario platformers. And it's like a 2D Mario platformer that then happens to be the freshest, most interesting game of the year, probably. And that cracks me up. I feel like that's a very Nintendo accomplishment.
Totally.
And it allows for a crossover between Giant Bomb and Kotaku. Synergy, cross-platform synergy.
There you go.
Between our two
finally.
sites. So, Patrick, how long have you been here now? You've been with us for, what, a year?
No, January 1st.
January 1st, so almost a year, just about a year.
Yeah, it always is longer than I think it is when we've hired somebody that I look back and say, oh, man, almost a year.
Yeah, I mean, I've been here for like less than 4 years, but it feels like 2 decades. So,
I'm not sure that's like the highest compliment for your job, Jason.
It just feels like I've been
feel free
doing
to
this
go with
forever.
that.
God.
it's because I love it so much that I dedicate so many hours to work that it feels like it's been more. I don't know. Hopefully, Steven isn't listening to this.
Keep digging your hole, Jason. Keep going.
I love it here. Well, so Patrick, I wanted to ask you, how much cooler is Kotaku than Giant Bomb?
Not a loaded question or anything.
Yeah, no, it's not loaded. I mean, it's, part of the reason I came here was because Giant Bomb is like a video centric site, right? Like this whole thing that I've done the last couple of days with Dan Reichert is video. And when I split off on my own, moved back home, came to Chicago, one of the things that was like painfully obvious was that like I was, not that other people don't write on the site, but I was basically the sole writer, and being on your own, doing that on your own, like wasn't nearly as interesting, and being like around a bunch of group of writers. So when I was at Giant Bomb in San Francisco, it's like I was doing video with a bunch of people that wanted to do video as well. And like that was really exciting and collaborative and interesting. And so the appeal of Kotaku was like flipping that. It was like I came into the industry doing writing, and video has become a big component, because if I want to have a job in 5 years, I better be okay at video, probably. But there was an opportunity at Kotaku to like just really focus on writing again, and that's been the most exciting part of it.
Yeah, it's funny because we just started ramping up video this year, like right after you came. I think we put together a video team at the company, and now we're doing this podcast. And you posted a couple of your Mario Maker videos on the site, right?
Yeah, and that's been fun to kind of like incorporate people into that and to share that. And one of the things I've had fun doing is I think Kirk and I and a couple other people are kind of constantly recording our the games we're playing even at night, under the idea that like lots of cool things happen, right. And it's fun to share that with the audience. Like that's been I like posting GIFs to the site where it's like, okay, this isn't worthy of a story. Yeah. Like I don't need to. The GIF tells the story, and hopefully you laugh at it, and hopefully you get something out of it. And that's I think that's the opportunities where even though Kotaku will probably always remain sort of a pretty writing-centric site, like there are ways of incorporating video and the things you can get out of that are fun for the audience and reflect, the little things that happen in games all the time that I think we take for granted, but often people end up celebrating and enjoying because it's a thing we all do.
A thing I've always liked about Giant Bomb that we haven't really done at Kotaku is just the social aspect of it. Like you were talking about when you were in San Francisco, you guys would all if you just go to Giant Bomb, you can see a bunch of people sitting in a living room playing video games together, and that I think I've really liked the way that adding GIFs and motion graphics and whatever to articles and making it more like you're kind of experiencing a game alongside a writer. What I've always liked about Giant Bomb is that you feel like you're, it's their whole appeal maybe, is that you feel like you're in a room playing video games with a bunch of cool people. And that I feel like maybe if we get a couch in the office, Jason. I haven't been to the new office, but
we tried
I feel
to
like
get
I really
a couch,
do.
but we couldn't. It was really sad. Like
I really
Deadspin
do
has a
want us
couch,
to be able to do
Gawker
that.
has a couch. We don't have a couch. It's really, really disappointing.
Of course, Gawker gets a couch.
I think that's what's happening kind of across the board is sort of like the humanizing of the people behind everything, right?
Yeah.
Like that's happening not just in media, that's happening in game development, that's happening like just as a society, we have moved in a direction in which we are personalizing things in a way, and that's a process as all of us have come up in writing and reporting and commenting in ways that the byline didn't matter, right? Like it really didn't. It did for some people, but that has become increasingly an important part of that, and I think finding ways to sort of relate to the audience in a way that shows that hey, we're sitting around playing games and doing the cool things you were doing too. Like that's really fun and that's really exciting. Like those are absolutely the most enjoyable parts of my job, and it's reflected the direction of Kotaku in the last year and a half or so, in which trying to write more about what people are doing, because that's directly related to what we're doing as well as players, because that's just more of what's going on in the conversation, and a lot of that gets kind of lost when we talk about games and the way that the press usually does.
Yeah, I feel like people appreciate it when the writers and journalists talk to them like actual human beings and not like machines who are just spitting out copy for like one of those.
You don't think people like that when machines just spit copy at them? I don't know.
It makes you very replaceable. And yeah, I think we've all learned working in this industry that if you are replaceable, you will not survive very long.
Probably be replaced.
You will go to PR.
Yeah, I want us to cover, I really want us to cover more local co-op stuff. Like I think that one of the really fun things about Patrick and Dan's whole battle was that the entire thing was it was a 2-player game, like a shared, I don't know what you'd call it, like antagonist thing that you could experience both sides of it, and it had so much drama. There's so many local games that it's really fun to watch people play them with one another, and that we can't always cover, I don't think, as well as we could. So I really am going to be pushing for the couch thing, because I want to watch just a video of there's this game that we didn't cover called Knight and Damsel. Do you guys know this game? This is super random.
Matthew Kumar.
Yeah, Matthew Kumar worked on it, name? And it's a really cool game. I played a demo of it a long time ago, and it's out now, and we haven't covered it because it's this reverse game where you're trying to it's like a knight and a damsel, and you're trying to rescue one another, and whoever rescues the other one wins. But you're working against each other at cross purposes, and your maps, you're it's really hard to describe. The main mechanic of it though is very cool, and because it's hard to describe, it would be a great game to just show to people playing. I feel like there's no substitute for that, and we aren't doing that. So anyway, that's something that I liked that Giant Bomb did that we don't do enough, but maybe we'll start.
Tell Steven Totillo, come on, get your shit together.
I'm sure he'd be like, dude, we've been talking about this for a
call.
month and talking about how we can't do this, and now it's frustrating. But
get us a couch.
Yeah, basically the answer is
Couchgate.
By the time I visit New York, I want there to be a couch, if for no other reason that I can nap on it during the day.
Yeah, you guys have to see the new office. Hopefully you guys can come out soon, because it's pretty crazy. It's the construction is almost over, so now we have furniture in place, and the walls are
there's an active drilling happening in the background.
Not anymore.
Nice.
It's really cool. You guys should come check it out. I'm in the sound studio right now. We have a friggin' sound studio. Who would have thought Gawker Media Kotaku would have a sound studio?
Yeah, it's all happening.
Well, if they won't buy you a couch, I've got this account with $11,000.
I need to spend this shit on something this year.
The charity is for the couch. Hey, look, You should hold on to that because in March, if Hulk Hogan somehow wins his dumbass lawsuit, we might need any money. You can give that charity to Nick Denton. I think he'll appreciate it.
Keep that in mind.
So we have a reader question. Pretty good one. Pretty good reader question. Or listener question, sorry. Well, I guess you got to be a reader. You're probably a Kotaku reader.
Listener, reader. Reader is fair.
So Joseph Knight says, "Hey, love the podcast. I was wondering..." Well, of course he loves the podcast. Thank you, Joseph, for loving the podcast. "I was wondering, what are your opinions on fan projects? Do you think they are harmful to the IP?" So I assume Joseph is talking about mods and fan games and stuff like that. The Deus Ex thing that you were talking about before, Patrick, might be a good example, or like all the Chrono Trigger fan sequels that have come up over the years and ROM hacks and stuff like that. Kirk, what do you think of fan projects?
I mean, I don't make video games, so I think they're great. You know what I mean? I can't think of a downside of somebody making something as cool as, I don't know, Black Mesa, I always think of as one of the ultimate fan projects ever. And that's a really incredible thing that those people made. They remade Half-Life, but it's not exactly Half-Life, but it's sort of Half-Life. But it's a very cool thing. And I think that I'm in favor of any cool things that people want to make. If people want to make cool things, that's great. If you want to put, to what we were talking about in Mario Maker, if you want to use a shared cultural touchstone or characters that we all already understand and turn it into something else with your own creative vision, great. I think that, yeah, of course.
How would you feel if someone tried to remake your review of Destiny?
Well, that would be a little weird because it's writing, but I'd be fine with that. I mean, I've thought about it in a musical sense.
Okay.
I've recorded tunes before, and if people remix them, that's cool. It can be a little weird, I think, as a creator to see your stuff go through another lens, especially if someone took one of my tunes and remixed it and made it sound all fucked up. But
dubstep version.
But I think if you're I think for most creative people, you're probably fundamentally okay with that idea because all of creation is a constant act of digestion and regurgitation, basically.
Well, one time, actually pretty often other video game sites recreate the news that we break on Kotaku.
So that's where we're going with this. This is, we can pick some bones.
No, I don't know. Well, okay. So Patrick, what do you think of fan projects?
Well, it seems like the line in the sand for a lot of companies, which I think is reasonable, is when money becomes part of the equation, right? So I think you'll often see, for Square, for example, right? So you've got they were okay with this Deus Ex Revision, which is an ambitious mod that overhauls a lot of the art in the game and fixes some AI and stuff like that. They probably have no plans, or at least this reveals they have no plans to go remake the original Deus Ex, right? In an event that they were going to go do that, they probably put the kibosh on this in some way or don't allow it to be as official. If they were charging for it, I guess you could see why they might be a little upset about that or not allow that to happen. But by and large, I think as long as they're not charging money for it, I fail to see why most companies would get as egregious as they sometimes do, right? So you also had another example with Square, which I think it's not surprising they're involved in a lot of this stuff, given the dedication and passion of their fans from games that are often rooted in games from a decade ago, if not more. So was it Final Fantasy Type O had a group of people that were doing a fan translation because by all accounts, Square was not going to bring that game over. And then they had to cancel that fan translation because Square was actually doing their own proper translation. And that's an example. If I'm getting the timeline on that wrong, correct me. But that's an example, I would think of something where reasonably the company is saying we're putting out an official version of this. We don't want you to undermine the product that's coming.
Well, so yeah, I was actually about to bring that up. So what happened was I covered the story pretty closely back when it happened. So it was right before E3 of 2014. And these guys have been working on the translation pad for a while. Well, okay, so back in the day, they announced Final Fantasy Type 0. Back in 2011, it came out in Japan. It slowly became clear that Square was never going to release it here, even though I had heard from sources that they had finished the localization and done a script and everything was basically complete. But they decided for financial reasons, PSP is dead, the Vita was just coming out, they couldn't do it, and they would try to find a way to re-release it in the future. Anyway, so these guys start making this fan translation project, and and doing the localization themselves. And they're preparing to release it. They say in the beginning of 2014, we're going to release it like in August or September or something like that. Then E3 comes along, and suddenly they surprise release it like the Sunday before E3. They release the translation patch and people download it and everything. The next day or 2 days later, Square announces at E3 that they're releasing Type 0 HD. And as it turned out, the guy in charge of the fan translation project went rogue. Like, he found out, I guess, under NDA that they were releasing this HD version, and so he went rogue and just released the patch on his own, being like, oh, I'm just going to put it out there. So that was a weird situation. I can imagine that would turn Square off from fan projects the future. But the localization patch thing is interesting because there are a lot of games that get stuck in Japan and never come west. And there's always a question of, like, do we deserve to get those games? Like, Mother 3 is a good example of that. And the only way to play that game in English, because Nintendo never released it here, is to, like, emulate it and download the fan translation patch. And that brings up all sorts of interesting questions about whether that should be allowed, whether Nintendo should or shouldn't support it, whether they should try to shut it down, and is it ethically okay to pirate that game?
Yeah, I've wanted to play that game for a long time. I've played Earthbound for the first time. I futzed with it when it came out originally, and it didn't do anything for me. I think because I was too young to sort of like get the ironic nature of it. Like, it was a game that was commenting in a way that just didn't quite connect with myself when that game came out. But loved it when I played it on the Wii U when it finally came out in the Virtual Console. And so I really want to play Mother 3. And I think it's, between Nintendo's steps they've taken in the last year and a half or so, that I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that they might eventually get around to doing something with Mother 3. But in the interim, like, if they're not offering me an option to play that game, like, am I just supposed to not play that game, right? Like, if I could give them $30 right now, I would love to play Mother 3, but I can't. In the absence of even a promise that they might do something with it someday, I think, yeah, legally speaking, you shouldn't do that, but, as a game fan, like, I fail to see who's harmed in that.
So ethically, if you download and pirate Mother 3, you have to mail an envelope with $40 in cash to Nintendo HQ in Japan. Fair?
Do I have to do it in dollars or yen?
Dollars, please. 40 yen,
right.
That's like, it's like 10 cents.
Well, I was gonna do the conversion.
$40 in yen.
They can handle dollars. Dollars are pretty strong these days. They can.
What if I'll send them 40 yen and just be like, hey, I'm American. I don't understand. If you just released this on the eShop, I could have just given you my real
Dear
money.
Mr. Miyamoto. Miyamoto picks up the envelope. Oh my God, Patrick Klepek just sent me 40 yen.
That idiot playing that Mario Maker
Maker
stage?
Mario Maker player in the world just sent me 40 yen. Holy shit, we have to release Mother 3.
Yeah, it's a really complicated question, and I think it doesn't have easy answers, both from a fan and developer perspective, but I think, you have to look at Nintendo and their approach or non-approach as, I don't know if I go as far as say like tacit endorsement, but they could have shut this down in a way that they have shut down other things. And so the fact that they haven't, I feel like, is them in some way going, this doesn't affect us, right? Like the YouTube stuff, right? That affects them, right? Like they feel that affects them. So they go and take steps toward taking things down, content ID strikes, coming up with a partner program. Whereas I think Mother 3 is just such small fish, like they just don't feel like it's worth it for them. So they may not be okay with it, but it's not worth for them to get the ire of their fans because it doesn't affect their bottom line.
Yeah, and that's kind of a good way for them to think of it. Like that is the Nintendo that I like. I think when they think, all right, well, this is making a lot of people happy, they can check out this game. If fans want to take the risk, basically, that putting all this work in isn't going to wind up just being totally overshadowed by an official version, then yeah, like, go for it. It's nice to see it.
They did release Mario Maker, so maybe they do care. Maybe they do care about the fans.
And they did Earthbound Beginnings? Is that what they called it?
The worst game in the series. They decided that's the one we should translate and put out there. Not Mother 3.
But why bother doing that if you're not going to finish it. I just
don't
that's
get
that's
it
why
either.
it gives me faith that they
Yeah,
will
right.
get around to
It
doing it.
makes
'Cause
it
it doesn't
seem like
make
they
any
will.
sense.
Yeah, but it's so baffling. I mean, anyone who's cared about it has played. Like the fan translation patch came out in like 2009, I think, or 2008. So like anyone who has cared about that game has played it a long time ago. So
Yeah, but if you buy that, then maybe you'll get another Earthbound. That's what Nintendo fans will
That's-
tell
oh,
themselves.
Oh man, it's
Yeah.
always the lie we tell ourselves. Support
it's funny.
this, and you'll
Square
get more
Enix
of what you
came
like.
out. Square Enix came out, and like they have these Dragon Quest games that are out in Japan for the 3DS, 7 and 8. They're remakes of the older ones, and they never release them here. And a lot of people want them, and so they came out and said, "Well, we'll see how if people buy Dragon Quest Heroes." And Dragon Quest Heroes is like a Dynasty Warriors game. It has nothing to do with actual Dragon Quest, and it's just like the most ridiculous.
Well, remember,
holding
this is the
people
company
hostage.
that said we'll move up the Deus Ex release date if like enough people pre-order.
People
so-
pre-order. Yeah, some baffling decisions over there.
Yeah.
So just a reminder, all you listeners, if you want to send in a question for the podcast, you can email us at splitscreen@kotaku.com. Splitscreen@kotaku.com. Patrick Klepek, thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having
The
me.
best Mario Maker player in the world officially took the title.
At least,
We're so
at least for
honored.
the next 24 hours. I get this day to myself, and then I'll pass the
Enjoy
mantle.
it.
What if
while it lasts.
I feel like we should be what if we challenge Kotaku to make like the hardest Mario Maker stage
We
possible
should. That's a good idea.
and have Patrick
I haven't.
play it?
I have not even unlocked any of the literally. I have not unlocked any of the creation tools. I played the first little bit that they give you, and then immediately jumped into Course World.
Yeah.
So I need to do the little cheat to get access to
Okay,
everything.
I think-
But yeah, I think it'd be fun to do something.
I've been
collaborative.
inspired to make something to challenge you.
If you want to make a level, Jason, I will play your
Okay,
level.
Good deal. And if Kotaku readers feel like they want to challenge Patrick Klepek, then they should make a level. Send it to us. Send it to splitscreen@kotaku.com. We will make Patrick play it if it's good.
Mm-hmm.
If it's good.
No, that's not even a requirement.
Yeah, no, I was
Well, by
gonna say,
good,
it doesn't
I
need to be
mean
good.
soul crushing.
If
By
it
good, I mean-
exists and is playable, Patrick will play it.
Yeah.
If it exists
Yep.
and is playable and it will devour your soul, then we will make Patrick play it. Patrick Klepek, people can find you at your Twitter, Patrick Klepek, right? Your Twitch, YouTube, all those
You
things.
just take at Patrick Klepek, you dump it into any service on the internet. I have probably registered an account for
Nice,
it.
you're doing it right.
I cover my bases.
Pornhub.com/Patrick Klepek.
You know what? I wouldn't put it past. Someone will probably do that now. Years ago, I mentioned that I had never registered patrickklepek.com, but it still existed. Someone went and snatched
Oh,
that
no.
out. They gave it back to me,
no.
but be careful what you wish for.
Someone signed me up for a porn service the other day. I got an email saying I'd been signed up for like Chatterbait. I wasn't sure what that was.
Yikes.
but
Sounds
it
like
sounds
dicey.
like a mix between chat and masturbate. So
Yeah.
I assume it's a good little portmanteau there. It was like, you have been signed up for this. I was like, please remove me from this list. That's the last thing I need.
Is that really what you said, Jason? I'm not sure I buy it.
Okay,
Make
I
me a
said
VIP.
I love Chatterbait. I
I'm
want to
into this.
Chatterbait everywhere.
Keep me signed up.
All right. Any final words from you folks? Kirk.
I'm going to play more
let's go
Mario
podcast.
Maker. I'm going to go play
Kirk,
more
stop
Mario
playing
Maker.
Destiny.
I'm going to start playing Mario Maker
Start
and play
playing
less
Mario
Destiny.
Maker. We're going to challenge Patrick Klepek. We're going to make the hardest level ever.
Yeah.
This
Yep.
has been Kotaku Split Screen. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yep. Bye, everybody.
All right, take it easy, guys.